Hatred lives next to something darker. When Christopher whispers against her neck, when his hands leave bruises that feel like fire, when he looks at her like she's the only thing keeping him from burning the world down. Hello everyone, and welcome back. I hope you watched the previous parts. If not, go watch them first to fully understand the story. Before we begin part 3, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers. Now, let's step deeper into the darkness and begin part 3. After some time had passed, Emily slowly woke up in that very room. She looked around and realized she was in Victor's bedroom, which meant she was no longer in that cellar. Unfortunately, the moment the memory of what had happened there returned to her, tears began to fall. She started crying, truly crying, from the depths of her heart. She had done nothing to deserve such a cruel punishment. For what? Just because she had gone out to the garden? Even the garden had been taken away from her. Emily could no longer endure all of this. She had reached her limit. Living with Victor like this was becoming unbearable. She could not deny that during the past 3 weeks she had lived moments of great happiness with him, but even so, she could not accept his control over her to such an extreme degree. No, she could not remain silent any longer. Enough silence. She had to free herself from him and from the prison in which he kept her. She would escape from him and from his tyranny. Yes, she would do it, and she would do it now. Emily got out of bed and changed her clothes. She put on a pair of jeans and a long-sleeved white t-shirt. She left her long hair loose over her shoulders, then walked toward the drawer beside the bed. Opening it, she took the money she might need to get away from there. She quietly left the room and headed toward the kitchen, where she found one of the maids. Emily smiled gently. "Could you please prepare the bathtub for me? I'm feeling a little tired." The maid nodded. "Of course, ma'am." Emily hesitated for a moment. "Wait a second. Is Mr. Victor here?" The maid answered, "Yes, ma'am. He's in his office." Emily's voice was steady. "Thank you." The maid went upstairs. Emily glanced at the wall clock and realized it was the servants' break time. At this hour, they usually gathered in their dining hall, chatting and enjoying a little rest. And that was the perfect opportunity to escape. Quietly, Emily slipped out of the kitchen and headed toward the back garden of the mansion, where there were no guards. The guards were stationed only at the main gate of the estate. She reached the wall and realized it was rather high. After a moment of hesitation, she climbed the tree standing beside it. From there, she carefully pulled herself up onto the top of the wall and jumped down to the other side. Emily felt a sharp pain shoot through her leg from the impact of the jump, but she forced herself to endure it. She began running as fast as she could. She ran and ran, pushing her body to its limits, trying to get as far away from him as possible. Finally, she reached the main road. A small smile appeared on her lips, even as tears streamed down her cheeks. She decided to stop the first car she saw and ask the driver to take her to the bus station. From there, she would leave the city. A car soon pulled over beside her. Emily quickly got into the back seat, silently praying that Victor would not find her. She kept glancing through the rear window to make sure no one was following them. Still looking behind her nervously, she spoke to the driver. Emily's voice was pleading, "Please, take me to the bus station." The driver's voice was calm. "With pleasure, my princess." Emily's eyes widened in shock. Damn it. Damn it. It was him. Victor. Oh God, what could she do now? She had escaped from him, only to climb willingly into his car. She grabbed the car door handle and tried to open it, but it was locked. Damn. It was going to kill her now, without a doubt. Her body trembled in terror as she stared at his reflection in the rear-view mirror. What she saw only made her fear worse. His eyes were blazing red with anger, the veins in his neck standing out clearly. He was furious. Emily didn't dare utter a single word, but her tears continued to fall endlessly. Victor, on the other hand, remained silent. Perhaps if he spoke, he might truly kill her in his rage. Instead, he pressed harder on the accelerator. Within minutes, they arrived at the mansion. Victor stopped the car, stepped out, and walked around to the back door. He opened it, grabbed Emily's arm roughly, and pulled her out before slamming the door shut behind them. Without saying a word, he dragged her inside. Emily was still crying, sobbing in terror. Victor finally released her in the reception hall and shouted loudly, his voice echoing through the entire mansion. Victor's voice thundered, All the servants outside. No one enters this house again until I order it." The servants rushed out to the garden immediately. No one wanted to remain anywhere near Victor when he was this angry. Now Emily was alone with the beast in the mansion. Victor began walking toward her. With every step he took, her body trembled more and more, her heart pounding violently in her chest. The moment he reached her, he struck her across the face with the back of his hand. Emily lost her balance and fell to the floor. Victor dropped to his knees in front of her, grabbed her hair harshly, and forced her head up. Emily cried out in pain. Leaning closer, Victor whispered in a deadly tone. Victor's voice was low and dangerous. "I promised myself I would make you happy. I was even planning a beautiful trip, just for you. I swallowed my pride and dignity, and came to apologize for something that wasn't even my fault, just for your comfort." His eyes darkened further as he continued. Victor's voice grew more intense. "3 weeks ago, after our wedding night, I promised myself I would change for you. I told myself I would treat you with kindness, with love, and that I would never hurt you, even though those things don't suit me at all. You know very well they're not part of my nature." His eyes grew even fiercer when he saw her crying. His voice turned sharper, colder. Victor's voice was filled with rage. "And what did you do?" He leaned closer. "You tried to escape, Emily. You dared to defy me. Do you have any idea what your damned escape did to me? I felt like I had lost my mind, my very soul." Emily raised her hands and grabbed the hand that was gripping her hair. Through her tears, she pleaded. Emily's voice was broken. "I'm sorry. I won't do it again. Please, Victor, please." Victor suddenly covered her mouth with his hand and pressed hard against it. Grinding his teeth, he whispered harshly. Victor's voice was a deadly whisper. "I don't want to hear a single word from you. How dare you? How dare you? You'll regret this. I swear I'll make you regret it so much that you'll bite your own fingers in remorse." He yanked her up by the hair and dragged her upstairs. Emily's crying grew louder, her sobs echoing through the halls. Victor pushed open the bedroom door and finally released her, before walking toward the bar inside the room. He sat down and poured himself a glass of liquor. His heart ached terribly. How could the woman he loved leave him like that? How could she abandon him when he had already decided to change himself just for her? He had been trying to make her happy, thinking only about her comfort, while she had been trying to run away from him. Her actions felt like a knife driven straight into his heart. Betrayal, yes, betrayal. She had betrayed his love and trampled over his heart when she ran away without even thinking about him. Victor closed his eyes and took a deep breath, trying to restrain the beast inside him that was struggling to break free, to spill her blood and end everything. But damn the heavens and the earth if he allowed that to happen. No, he would punish her so severely that she would wish to return to even a fraction of the life she had before. But he would never kill her. He would never allow himself to do that. Slowly, Victor forced a mask of cold composure over his face. After suppressing his anger and regaining control of himself, he turned toward her, his gaze traveling slowly from her feet to the top of her head. After several long moments of silence, he finally spoke. Victor's voice was cold. "Come here." Emily walked toward him with fearful steps. When she stood before him, she looked at him silently, her eyes filled with fear. Victor's voice remained cold. "Why did you run away?" Emily stared at him in shock. She had expected anything from him, anything except that question. Swallowing nervously, she decided to tell him the truth. If she lied, his anger would only grow worse. Emily's voice was hesitant. I was tired of your control and your anger. That's why I ran away, to escape from you." Victor remained expressionless. "And where exactly were you planning to go?" Emily's voice faltered. I don't know." Victor's tone was flat. "So you were planning to live on the streets? As far as I know, you have no family besides me." Emily fell silent. Sadness appeared on her face as she lowered her gaze. What he said was true. She had no one in this world except Victor. He was her cousin, and at the same time, her husband. Victor looked at her calmly, noticing the sadness written across her face. It was clear she could not bear the thought that he was the only person left in her life. A mocking smile slowly appeared on his lips. Victor's voice was cold and amused. "So, my dear Emily, unfortunately for you, you lost all the good members of your family, and the only one left is your damned cousin, who also happens to be your husband now. He leans slightly forward, his eyes cold. I am all you have left. I am everything you own now, princess. He paused for a moment before continuing in a flat voice. So I've decided that we'll start a new page from now on, partly to keep you safe, because otherwise I might end your miserable life, and partly to preserve my own sanity. His gaze hardened. From this moment on, you will not open that cursed mouth of yours without my permission. That will be your first rule. Emily tried to speak, but before a single word could leave her lips, Victor struck her violently. The slap threw her to the ground, as if she were nothing more than an object. The pain was indescribable. For a moment, Emily felt as if her skull had shattered. So this was the real Victor. But this time was different. There had been no emotion in the blow, only rage and hatred. Emily swallowed with difficulty, her trembling hand rising slowly to her burning cheek. She lifted her head and looked at him. Victor stood before her calmly, leaning back against the bar. He lit a cigarette and stared at her with lifeless eyes. Meanwhile, she lay at his feet like a slaughtered animal. No matter how much she wanted to stand, terror held her frozen in place. She didn't even have the courage to look away from him. She could see it clearly in his eyes. Madness. Endless madness. Even in his calm state, his presence was terrifying. It was as if he were fighting himself, struggling to prevent himself from causing her real harm, or leaving her permanently broken. Emily realized then that it was over for her. The Victor standing before her now was not the man she had known before. She knew he wouldn't keep his demons restrained for long, but she had never expected to see them this soon. She had needed more time, but it seemed her time had already run out. Victor took a long drag from his cigarette and exhaled slowly, sighing with boredom. Victor's voice was flat. The game is over, princess. Now it's time to get serious. His eyes narrowed slightly. Normally, I don't let traitors live. Under normal circumstances, I would burn them alive and wipe out their entire bloodline. He paused briefly before continuing coldly. But since I'm still unable to do that to you, I'll turn you into my little pet. A cruel smile spread across his lips. An accursed servant beneath my feet. Emily's eyes widened in shock at his words. Victor simply smiled coldly. But before that, my dear, you must be punished for trying to escape. Emily's body trembled with fear. Victor moved from his place, heading toward one of the cabinets. He opened it and took out a long, wide whip, then closed the cabinet and returned to the young girl. Victor's voice was cold. These two beautiful feet will be punished now, my dear, because through them you ran away from me. He grabbed a piece of fabric from the room and tied her hands behind her back. Emily cried, "Please, don't, ah!" She screamed in pain from the lash of the whip that stung her feet. The blows continued on her pure white feet, starting from her thighs and ending at her toes. He kept lashing her, one strike after another, and the sound of Emily's pained screams echoed throughout the place. His strikes nearly exceeded 60 lashes. As soon as Victor finished beating her, he threw the whip on the ground. He had had enough. He leaned down toward her and untied her bonds. She sat up straight, her tears streaming from her eyes like a waterfall. Her feet had become like hell. She couldn't bear to have anything touch them. She tried to rub her feet, hoping to ease the pain a little, while he headed toward one of the chairs in the room. He sat upon it like a king, with arrogance, crossing one leg over the other. Then he said sternly, "Come closer." Emily looked at him weakly with innocent eyes, on the verge of fainting from the intense pain. But she straightened up, trying to stand on her feet, which were no longer fit for walking. However, like a flash of lightning, he straightened up in his seat, putting his foot down, glaring at her intensely, as he said harshly, "On your hands and knees, my little pet." Emily jolted in fright. She looked toward him pleadingly, hoping he would change his decision, but she saw nothing in his eyes but evil. She knelt on the ground on her hands and knees, swallowing the bitterness of that humiliation inside her, her tears still flowing. She moved toward him, pressing her lips together hard in pain. As soon as she got close to him, she pleaded with fear and hope. "Please, Victor, I'm sorry. I swear I won't do it again. This punishment is enough. Please." But he suddenly grabbed her hair from behind, lifting her face to his level. He raised his other hand and wiped the tears from her cheek with his thumb, then leaned down and kissed her right cheek. He whispered in her ear with a devilish smile and a spine-chilling voice, The punishment started from this moment, my kitten. Emily's voice was shocked. What? Victor's voice was cold and deliberate. From now on, my dear, you will not do anything without taking permission from me. And these little feet. Victor closed his eyes, remembering what he had told her over the past 3 weeks. That her beautiful feet should never touch the ground in his presence. That he would carry her in his arms and take good care of her. He had indeed done what he said. Victor opened his eyes and continued, "You will not walk on them from now on. When I call you, you will come to me on all fours, my kitten. And from now on there will be no time for play. You will clean the palace alone and prepare food for your husband, because I will dismiss all the servants tonight. As for my rights in bed, you will be ready at any time to fulfill my desires. So prepare yourself well, my kitten, because I will fuck you whenever I please and wherever I please. In addition, you are forbidden to sit on the palace furniture. You will sit on the floor at my feet. Finally, from now on, you will address me as sir. I don't want to hear my name from your little mouth anymore. Only the words, yes, sir, and know also that every mistake you make, you will be punished for, no matter how small. And if you violate anything I mentioned earlier, you will be punished severely, my kitten. Is that clear?" Emily kept staring at Victor in shock, unable to believe that he was serious about making her his pet and his concubine. Would it really end with her being like that? Or would the tables turn? In a faraway place, specifically in that bar, our little Joanna was sitting alone, immersed in her own world that revolved only around her tormentor and the love of her heart and soul, Ricardo. Joanna drank her glass in one gulp, trying to forget what she had seen hours before. Damn, it wasn't like it was the first time. But damn, the pain didn't change or lessen no matter how much she pretended not to care. Joanna gasped, placing her hand on her heart in pain. Damn, was this the price of her love for a scoundrel and devil like Ricardo? Damn everything. Why did she have to be a bad girl falling madly in love with Ricardo? Yes, her love for Ricardo made her a bad girl. Joanna smiled as soon as she remembered what Ricardo did to her to force her to live with him in his mansion. Damn that scoundrel. 3 weeks ago, Ricardo destroyed her house and burned it completely, leaving nothing but ashes, to force her to live with him afterward. Although Ricardo's way was crazy, and no sane person would do it, Joanna was happy because she would see her beloved Ricardo daily. Joanna cursed Ricardo inside as she drank one last glass. Even the mention of his name made her heart tremble. She closed her eyes in sorrow as she thought of Ricardo, who brought her close and made her live with him under one roof. But the bastard had not, during these 3 weeks, considered her his beloved, nor even called her by her name. Only, my little cat, my little girl, that was all he called her. The bastard was worse than Victor and Christopher. She almost swore he suffered from a split personality. He indeed had 2 sides, the devilish mischievous side and the dark domineering side. Damn, both sides were bad and extremely dangerous. Indeed, as they say, everyone has their own devil. Heaven knows, this was true. For her devil was the man who made her life a living hell in every sense of the word. Yes, Ricardo was her devil, and an ordinary person hates their devil, right? But she spent her life just trying to please him, or to catch even one loving glance from him. Even in the past 3 weeks, he had not done that. Just one glance would have been enough for her, but she couldn't get it. She started acting crazy just to get his attention. But it wasn't enough. Nothing she did was enough for him. She wished he would acknowledge her as his beloved. She wanted him to make her his wife. That was all her dreams. His love turned her into a crazy bad girl, perhaps even a monster. She didn't know exactly which, but what she knew well was that she suffered in the past 3 weeks, a torment more severe than the pain she tasted while being away from him. She suffered seeing him with his prostitutes. Every night he had a new girl. Their screams calling his name echoed at night in her ears, as if he deliberately wanted her to hear them. Joanna gasped, feeling her heart about to explode. How she cursed herself for falling in love with him. But what could she do? Everything about him captivated her, even though her madness might also go beyond all limits. But when she stood before him, she became a weak cat, for his love tore down all her walls. He was the most handsome man she had ever seen in her life, a man in every sense of the word. Joanna drank half the bottle angrily, as she remembered the reason for coming to the bar. escaping from her painful reality. Yes, she fled from the pains of her heart, and came here, for the bastard had shattered her heart badly today. Joanna had seen him with one of the girls. Yes, he was having sex with her right in front of her eyes. She saw how the girl was screaming his name while beneath him, and his eyes were fixed on her without blinking. She had accidentally entered his office and seen them, but the bastard did not stop. He didn't care. He just stared at her while tearing apart his new whore. Joanna shook her head, drinking another glass, while still drowning in her sorrows. The sound of her phone ringing interrupted her thoughts. She cursed under her breath, took a deep breath, then answered. Joanna's voice was flat. Yes, Mark. Mark's voice was frantic. Damn you, little one. Damn it. What am I supposed to do? Ricardo will kill me and all the servants in the mansion because of you. Do you have any idea how much trouble you're in now? Joanna smiled foolishly. Why? What did I do? Mark's voice was sharp. Don't play dumb, little one. Mr. Ricardo is very angry because you left the house without telling anyone where you were, and now it's midnight, and you're not in the mansion. So if you don't want to die, come back now. Joanna sighed. Okay. Mark hung up. Joanna stared at her phone, anger tearing through every cell of her being. She cursed, breaking her phone several times on the table in front of her, with rapid breaths, cursing him and cursing the day she fell in love with him. She kept staring at the broken glass in front of her for a long time, until her anger calmed. But her hand trembled with fear as she whispered to herself, Damn, what have I done to the creator of hell? She immediately got up, throwing some money behind her to the bar owner. Then she got into her car and headed back to the mansion, her heart almost stopping from fear. As soon as Joanna arrived at the mansion, she entered with steady steps that did not reflect the terror she felt inside. She continued directly to Ricardo's office. Joanna opened the office door and closed it behind her. She was surprised to find the room dark and filled with the smell of alcohol and cigarettes. But what made her body shiver and her breath disappear was the man sitting in the darkness with his broad back facing her. The silence was deadly, which meant he was truly angry. Joanna remained standing in her place, keeping silent. He knew she was behind him, and she did not dare to speak before he allowed her to do so. Long minutes passed in silence, while she did nothing but tremble inside and stare at the ground, hearing him drink glass after glass with coldness, completely ignoring her. She stayed frozen in place for half an hour, without any movement. Only when she heard him move did she hesitantly raise her eyes upward, looking in his direction. She watched him walk toward the bar to pour himself another glass. Like every time she saw him, her heart began to beat wildly, and she no longer cared about her fear. Although the room was dark, and only the moon and the desk lamp lit the space, she was able to see him clearly. He was not wearing his jacket, only a black shirt covering his muscles. His huge body and broad shoulders did not hide their majesty in the darkness. The bottom of his shirt was rolled up, and most of the buttons were undone, revealing his tattoos, which added to his terrifying appearance. His expressionless face was masculine in every sense of the word, and his hair was messy, as if he had spent hours running his fingers through it in anger. Joanna was distracted by his handsomeness, and had completely forgotten the situation she was in. He interrupted her thoughts by turning to her, his dark eyes engulfing her. Her breath stopped for moments, as she quickly averted her gaze to the ground. Damn, damn, damn. Her terrified breaths were the only thing heard inside the room. She remained frozen like that for a long time, until she heard his voice that shook her bones. His voice was like hell, calm yet deadly. Ricardo's voice was low. Your scent is different. Joanna stammered. I was drinking. A little. He nodded with a deadly expression. Alone? Joanna nodded. Yes. Ricardo's voice was cold. Come closer. Joanna stepped forward to stand in front of him. As soon as she reached him, he slapped her with the back of his hand with all his strength, throwing her to the ground, as if she were a small doll. Joanna gasped, feeling as if someone had just broken her skull. The pain was unbearable, and blood started to drip from her mouth. It was not the first time he had done that. It had happened repeatedly over the past 3 weeks. Yet this time, the pain was unbearable, as if he deliberately wanted to hurt her more. Joanna struggled to regain consciousness as she slowly lifted her head from the ground, wiping the blood from her lips. Damn her. She heard his footsteps as he walked back to sit on the couch. He was smoking. She could smell the smoke. But damn it, why was he so angry like this? That was what she could not understand, until Ricardo's voice interrupted her thoughts, a voice resembling the roar of beasts. Ricardo's voice was harsh. "Get up and come here quickly." Joanna clenched her teeth in pain, standing on trembling legs, ignoring the pain in her head. She walked to stand in front of him, lowering her gaze like a little child. Ricardo's voice was angry. "You were missing for hours. Tell me where you were, and with whom. Tell me, my little one, who dared to look at what is mine, and who touched my little girl." His voice and features shook her bones. He believed she had been with another man, which was why he was like this. She wanted to answer him, but he spoke again. Ricardo's voice was cold and dangerous. "Don't lie to me, my little one, for I see the way men stare at you. Damn, how many men in the past 3 weeks until now have lost their lives because of you? How many scoundrels have I torn their eyes out for looking at what is mine? So speak now, damn it." Part of her could not believe what she was hearing, and another part was boiling with anger. How dare he think she had been with another man? She had accepted no one in her life except him, and she had done that only twice. He was the one who slept with a different girl every night. Damn him, as if he wanted her to see him doing that. Every time, he came back with a new prostitute. Damn, how angry she was. So, for a stupid reason, and perhaps because of the alcohol, she smiled and said, "I am not your lover. You, even until this moment, have not acknowledged me as a lover, or even a friend. You see me only as an annoying child, so I can do whatever I want, with whoever I want, and I can open my legs without your permission. I don't need your approval, right, Ricardo?" Ricardo's smile widened as he nodded, making her regret every word. Oh, how that smile made her wish she could tear her tongue out of her mouth. He continued staring at her for a long time, as if struggling to stay calm. He was in pain, trying to stop himself from tearing her apart limb by limb. Ricardo rose from his place and walked toward her with calm steps, causing Joanna to step back. But she froze in place as soon as she heard his voice. Ricardo's voice was sharp. As soon as he stood in front of her, he grabbed her arm and pulled her behind him out of the room. Joanna felt great terror, thinking that Ricardo would take her to a torture room or a cellar or something similar to punish her. But as soon as she noticed his hand holding hers, she forgot all that. She forgot her fear. She just kept staring at his hand holding hers. Damn, how much she enjoyed the feel of his hand on her skin. Those two hands and their touch were all she wanted in this life. She had always been thirsty for them. Even when he hit her, she was grateful for his touch. They could do whatever they wanted, even if they tore her body apart limb by limb. She would be grateful to them. She was sick, yes, sick with a disease called love for Ricardo. Joanna woke from her ecstasy and happiness when Ricardo released her hand and put her in the car. Damn, she didn't even realize they were leaving the mansion. Ricardo got into the car and drove away in an atmosphere filled with silence. After half an hour, or perhaps more, Ricardo stopped in a remote mountainous area. He got out of the car, taking Joanna with him. He climbed up to a somewhat high hill and sat on one of the rocks at its edge. Joanna stood behind him and felt the cold breeze grinding her bones. Without realizing it, she moved toward Ricardo and sat on the ground next to his foot. She wrapped her arms around his foot and rested her head on it, leaning and rubbing against him like a little cat seeking warmth. Ricardo felt her and smiled tenderly as he looked at the dark sky adorned with shining stars. He raised his hand, placed it on her hair, and stroked it. Joanna's voice was soft. "Why are we here?" Ricardo's voice was calm. "I always come here when I feel very angry and need calm. Here I feel comfort and peace. That's why we are here. I don't want to break your skull or cause you permanent damage." Damn, it seems I'm lucky. Ricardo nodded. Yes, it seems so. Joanna's voice was soft and hopeful. "Will you ever hate me, Ricardo? Or maybe, will you ever love me?" Ricardo's voice was calm. "Do you trust me, Joanna?" Joanna frowned, annoyed. "Don't answer my question with another question." Ricardo smiled. "Stand up." Joanna stood silently in front of him. Ricardo added in a commanding tone, "Close your eyes." Joanna quickly obeyed, closing her eyes and pressing her lips tightly from tension, not knowing what Ricardo intended to do. Ricardo's voice was steady. "Now step back." She took a step back with her eyes closed. Ricardo added, "Don't open your eyes, keep stepping back until you hear my voice telling you to stop." Joanna nodded quickly, and took several steps back, walking slowly as she felt she was on the edge of an abyss. Then she heard his command. Stop. Joanna froze in place, her heart pounding violently because she was very afraid of heights. She listened to his voice saying, "Open your eyes." Joanna opened her eyes wide with fear and gasped in shock as Ricardo suddenly pushed her, breaking the silence of the night. Her body collapsed downward with a scream. Ricardo smiled. "Stand up." Joanna stood silently in front of him. Ricardo added in a commanding tone, "Close your eyes." Joanna quickly obeyed, closing her eyes and pressing her lips tightly from tension, not knowing what Ricardo intended to do. Ricardo's voice was steady. "Now step back." She took a step back with her eyes closed. Ricardo added, "Don't open your eyes. Keep stepping back until you hear my voice telling you to stop." Joanna nodded quickly and took several steps back, walking slowly as she felt she was on the edge of an abyss. "Stop." Joanna froze in place, her heart pounding violently because she was very afraid of heights. She listened to his voice saying, "Open your eyes." Joanna opened her eyes. They widened with fear, and she gasped in shock as Ricardo suddenly pushed her. Her scream broke the silence of the night as her body fell downward, and in a moment, everything stopped. She opened her eyelids with terrified anticipation to find that she had not fallen. Ricardo was holding her hand and looking at her very calmly. Joanna looked at him with wide eyes and an open mouth. She glanced down, and her terror increased at the dizzying height. She was on the edge of death in every sense of the word. Ricardo held her hand, her body hanging from his grip, pressed against the edge of the hill. Ricardo's voice was cold. "Don't look down, or you'll fall." Joanna swallowed and gasped, trying to find air to breathe. Her voice trembled. "Ricardo, stop, please." Ricardo smiled. "What's wrong, my kitten? Don't you want to see the trust between us?" Joanna trembled with fear, clutching his hand. Her voice was choked and difficult. "Please stop, Ricardo. I can't take it anymore. Please." Ricardo stared at her calmly. "Okay, I will ask you several questions, and you will answer me. After that, I will decide either to lift you out of the abyss or to punish you with a long-term punishment." Joanna couldn't swallow. Her throat dried from intense fear as she stared at him. Ricardo's voice was calm. "Do you love me, little one?" Joanna's voice was a mix of crying and anger at his question and the situation she was in. "You bastard! Stop doing this!" Ricardo's voice sharpened. "Bastard?" He lifted her body slightly by her hands while she still hung in the air. He brought his face close to hers. "Do you want to see the bastard?" Joanna's eyes widened in terror at what he said. Ricardo let go of her hand. She closed her eyes and gasped in fear as he suddenly let her fall from the edge of the hill. She opened her eyelids with terrified anticipation to find that she had not fallen again. He was holding her hand and looking at her very calmly, just like before. Joanna looked at him with surprise mixed with fear. This disturbed side was not strange for a scoundrel like Ricardo. Joanna whispered pleadingly, "Please, Ricardo, let me out. Please, I'm scared." Ricardo's voice was cold. "It's simple, my dear. Answer my questions, and then I'll think about letting you out." Joanna cast a quick glance downward, swallowed, and answered softly, "Yes." Ricardo smiled provocatively. "I didn't hear you well." Joanna's voice was angry. "Damn it." Ricardo's smile disappeared as he raised his eyebrows. In a moment, he let her go. She barely screamed before he quickly grabbed her with the other hand. Joanna's breaths quickened violently as she stared at Ricardo with angry surprise. He returned her gaze coldly, raising his eyebrows, waiting for her answer. She shouted at him emotionally, her voice echoing around. "Yes, I love you." Ricardo smiled with delight when he reached his limit. He continued calmly, "Do you trust me, little one?" Joanna hurt from the situation, feeling as if her arm would tear apart. She sighed wearily and said softly, "Yes, I trust you, Ricardo. So please, let me out now." Ricardo smiled tenderly at his little one, whose love had begun to gnaw at his heart mercilessly. He cleared his throat and added, "Okay, one last question, and then I will let you out." Ricardo's voice was steady. "Were you alone in the bar today, my dear?" Joanna's eyes filled with tears, a mixture of distress and fear. Now she knew why he was doing all this. He was punishing her for what she had said before they came here. Her tears began to fall as she spoke. "Yes, I was alone. I swear to you I was alone, and no one was with me. I lied to you then just to make you angry. I'm sorry, Ricardo. I swear I'm sorry. Please let me out, Ricardo. That's enough, please. Ricardo nodded. Okay. In moments, he lifted her, pulling her into his arms. She couldn't resist. She clung to his neck, burying her head in his chest with exhaustion and weariness. She wanted to speak, but he tightened his embrace, making Joanna feel as if her heartbeats would stop. Damn, she had never been this close to him before. She felt his muscles, his breath, everything about him. One hand was on her neck, the other on her waist. She closed her eyes, unable to believe she was in his arms now. Ricardo's voice was low. You have no idea what you're doing to me, little one. Look at me. Joanna looked at him, barely able to breathe. Ricardo continued. Yes, those looks, those damn eyes that make me lose my mind. Damn, how many times I thought about tearing them out. He placed his hand on her lips, feeling them slowly. He continued, these lips, the things I can do with them. Those damn lips, if only you knew. Damn, you will be my death without a doubt. Joanna drifted away in Ricardo's words, unable to believe what she was hearing. Maybe she was dreaming now, a very beautiful dream she did not want to wake up from. Joanna didn't feel anything until Ricardo pounced on her. His lips tore hers apart. It was a brutal kiss. Nothing about it was gentle. How could it be, when she was kissing the devil himself? He devoured her, as if he wanted to take her soul out. He tore her lips, and his tongue touched every inch of her. Her moans increased his savagery, and his body crushed her bones. She was literally suffocating. She moved her head from side to side, begging for mercy, but he didn't let her go. She remained in his arms, under his mercy, until she lost consciousness. Only then did he move away from her. Ricardo smiled quietly at his little one as he stared at her bleeding lips. He approached her and licked her blood with pleasure. Then he lifted her in his arms and took her back to his palace, the place where she belonged. Yes, Joanna had become his and belonged to him alone. The next morning, our gentle princess woke up exhausted. Victor had spent a wild night with her yesterday, breaking her bones so much that she still felt tired until this moment. But there was no choice. She had to get up and prepare breakfast so her husband wouldn't punish her. Emily got up quickly and walked lightly so Victor wouldn't wake up. She put on her clothes and then went downstairs. She entered the kitchen, opened the fridge, and took out some slices of meat along with eggs and a little bit of potatoes. She started frying the food to cook it. Emily sighed with relief because she could fry. She wasn't very good at cooking. Since childhood, the servants were the ones who cooked. But now, after Victor ordered all the servants to leave, she had to do everything herself, from cooking to cleaning. Minutes passed. Emily was still distracted, preparing the dishes, when she was surprised by an arm that reached around her waist from behind. A cold shiver ran through Emily's body as Victor's masculine voice whispered into her ear. "What are you doing, my kitten?" Emily's voice was very nervous. "I'm preparing the food, Victor." Victor stepped back from Emily a little and stared at her. It seemed he had no good intentions. Despite Emily's great curiosity to know what he was going to do, her fear of him was much greater than her curiosity. So she stayed in place, turning her back to Victor. Her thoughts were interrupted by Victor's voice. "Take off your clothes, my kitten." Emily froze, her heart pounding with intense fear, but she did not dare to object. She began to take off her clothes piece by piece until she was completely naked in front of him. Victor's voice was cold. "You've become a bad cat, my dear, and bad cats must be punished. Do you know why you are being punished now?" Emily shook her head in denial, tears starting to fall. Victor continued, "You broke one of the rules I set for you. You were supposed to call me my master, but you didn't do that just now." Emily's body trembled with fear, her shaking clearly visible. Her voice was soft and trembling. "I'm sorry. Please, forgive me, my master. I will never repeat it. I promise, please." She spoke and sobbed amid her words. Victor added, "Yes, my dear. You will never repeat it again." He took off his belt and wrapped part of it around his right arm, leaving the other part free. Moments of silence were broken by the sound of the belt rising in the air and falling on Emily's backside. Emily jolted in pain and placed her hand on the spot, rubbing it to ease the pain a little. Victor's voice was firm. "Put your hands on the table, my kitten, and don't lift them. Come on, do it quickly." Emily gasped through her tears and placed both hands on the table, obeying Victor's orders. She knew very well that if she disobeyed, her punishment would increase, so she had a rule. The more she obeyed, the less the damage. She held on to hope that he would show her some mercy, even if just a little. Victor returned and struck Emily's backside again with the belt, then again, and again. The blows continued, and she could do nothing but cry and scream in pain. After a short while, Victor stopped hitting her. After the 50th strike, he threw the belt from his hand and approached Emily, who had collapsed in tears. He looked at her and saw her white backside covered with red stripes from the belt's blows. He turned her toward him, so that her face was opposite his. He kissed her lips with a passionate kiss. He pulled away as soon as he felt her choking, picked her up in his arms, and carried her up to his room. He laid her on the bed and made her lie on her stomach. He went to the closet and took out a cream to relieve the pain. He returned to Emily and applied some of it to ease her suffering. Then he helped her up and made her stand in front of him. He fetched one of his shirts and returned to dress her, struggling to keep a smile from appearing. Emily looked so sweet in his eyes. She was like a little girl before him, her eyes still shedding tears, her nose red, her cheeks burning with shyness. Her silky hair spread along her bare back, and her flawless, perfect body made her appearance both very attractive and gentle. Victor finished dressing Emily in one of his shirts. He laid her on the bed and climbed beside her, wrapping his arms around her, burying her head in his chest. Emily quickly fell asleep from exhaustion. She had been tired since yesterday, and Victor had continued with her today until she fell asleep without realizing it. He left that possessive lover staring at her, lost in thoughts revolving only around her. On a new day, with the sun shining its light on our heroes, Christopher was driving his car, lost in thought, never focused on the road ahead. But damn, how could he focus on anything when that woman made his life unbearable hell? His body burned with desire whenever she crossed his mind. Damn, the most beautiful women crawled beneath his feet, and any woman he wanted was his. But that damn one was different. It was as if he was losing control with her. In his life, he had never lost control. But now he found himself always angry when she was with him. Sometimes he was on the verge of pulling out his gun and shooting her, or even strangling her. Damn, yesterday he hit her hard, as if he wanted to kill her. But she wasn't afraid of him as usual. She didn't cry. She just wiped her blood with her hand and smiled at him. That made him lose his mind even more. Every move she made tempted him. Even her breathing was tempting. He snapped out of his daydream when he arrived in front of Ricardo's house. He got out quietly and headed inside, barely able to open his eyes due to the severe headache. Christopher cursed under his breath, grinding his teeth in anger. All this headache was because of that woman in his palace. He swore she was driving him crazy little by little. As soon as Christopher entered, he found Ricardo sitting in the reception hall, waiting for him with a smile that indicated Ricardo's disturbed and devilish side was what he was seeing now. But Christopher didn't care about that, and sat silently on the couch. Ricardo smiled. "What would you like to drink? Wine or coffee?" Christopher's voice was flat. "Coffee. No sugar." Ricardo nodded calmly, got up, and prepared the coffee himself. Christopher closed his eyes, resting his head back, as he still felt the headache and distraction, fully aware of it. But the coffee would be enough to fix that. Christopher's solitude was interrupted by Victor's arrival, who sat in front of him. But damn, Christopher didn't even look at him. He just wanted to get out of the whirlpool he was in. Ricardo came with 2 glasses of wine for himself and Victor, in addition to a cup of coffee for Christopher. He placed them on the table and sat with them. Christopher took the cup of coffee without looking at them, and sipped a little, hoping it would wake him from this annoying state. He stopped drinking, his features tensed. A sharp taste he had never tasted before. Bad as hell. Even his taste buds declared their inability to interpret what had just happened inside him. Christopher swallowed it despite himself, a strong shiver overtaking him. He whispered while feeling his throat. "What is this you gave me? Is it poison?" Ricardo's voice was innocent. "Coffee without sugar." Christopher's voice rose. "Just that? Is this really coffee without sugar? Look at my eyes. Don't lie." Ricardo shrugged. You asked for coffee without sugar, didn't you? Christopher's jaw tightened. What did you put instead of sugar? Ricardo hesitated, murmuring, isn't wet coffee supposed to be the better choice instead of sugarless coffee? Anyway, I put salt and some pepper. Christopher despised the taste. How could he forget that the one beside him was Ricardo? Such behavior was not strange to him at all. Christopher barely suppressed his anger. The taste of this coffee would haunt him in nightmares. He turned his gaze toward Victor, and found him sitting in front of them, staring coldly, as if watching a play. Christopher smiled slyly as he noticed the blood on Victor's shirt. He added provocatively, look who we have here. A cat with 7 lives. It seems you were attacked before coming here, right, dear Victor? Victor's voice was cold. Yes, I was. Ricardo's curiosity was fake. Oh, how did that happen? Tell me. Victor's voice was flat. Do you want the truth or honesty? Christopher raised an eyebrow, staring at Victor. It seemed the strangeness infection had passed to him from Ricardo. Ricardo's voice was sharp. Damn you, Victor. Don't play with words with me. Tell me what happened. Victor shrugged. On my way here, I was attacked by a man who stabbed my arm while I was off guard. That's all. Christopher's voice was curious. And what did you do to him? Victor's smile was cold. Nothing. I just separated his head from his body. Christopher and Ricardo smiled sarcastically. They really were monsters and beasts, maybe demons, but of a special kind. Christopher stood. I want to leave now. Finish this, Ricardo, and let me go. Ricardo nodded. Okay. He got up and brought 2 black folders, handing one to Christopher and the other to Victor. All the required information is here. Christopher smiled quietly and stood. Victor stood with him. They left the place, each with his mind on his beloved. As for Ricardo, he cursed them and went upstairs to his little Joanna, who was still sleeping. Upon Christopher's return, Christopher headed straight to his room. As soon as he entered, he found Celine in front of him. He ignored her presence and went to sit on the bed. Celine approached him and stood before him. Finally, you came. He smiled sarcastically. Did you miss me, little one? Celine bit her lower lip seductively, continuing to stare into his dark eyes. Damn, the bastard was very handsome. The aura of crime surrounding him made him even more attractive. She gasped when he pulled her forcefully to sit in his lap. He added with a smile, scared? Celine wrapped her arm around his neck. Very. Christopher's smile widened as he ran his hand over her bare back. You're very beautiful, you know that? Dangerously beautiful. Whoever sees you will never know how ugly you are inside. How would they know that beneath this beautiful face lies boundless evil and absolute hatred? They will never know that you're just trash. Celine smiled, bringing her lips close to his. Well, you know what they say. Trash only attracts trash. She gasped in pain when Christopher dug his fingers into her back. Christopher's voice was low and dangerous. Be careful, little one. You know I have a very dangerous mood. You don't want me to break your beautiful face now, do you? Celine changed the subject as soon as she felt the danger. She placed her hand on his cheek. Don't leave me alone in the palace, Christopher. She sighed and gave him a quick kiss on the lips. I feel lonely when you're away. Then she kissed him again. Her kisses were quick, not giving him a chance to return them. She continued, when you leave me alone and go to work, who will I play with? She kissed him again. This time she didn't have time to pull away. He grabbed the back of her neck. Holding her firmly, he kissed her with a savage kiss. She felt it in every part of her mouth. It was a very violent kiss. Celine dug her fingers into his hair, trying to keep up with him, but in vain. The kiss was crazy, and the sound of her moans filled the place. She hated the feelings his kiss stirred inside her. Her breath was almost cut off. She bit her lower lip hard to make him stop, but he smiled, and his kiss became even more intense. He only pulled away when she was about to lose consciousness. Celine gasped strongly, trying to catch her breath. Her lip was bleeding. Christopher reached out, wiped it with his thumb, then put his thumb in his mouth. Damn, the bastard was very dangerous. Christopher kept staring at her with a cold smile for a long time. His eyes penetrated her soul. Christopher was different from every man she had ever seen in her life. He was the only one who made her bones tremble with just one look from him. But damn the heavens, if she showed this to him. Celine swallowed, trying to escape her feelings. She sighed with boredom. Well, since you can't stay with me, I'll go and sleep with someone else until you come back, dear Chris. Damn, damn, damn. Celine knew she was playing with the count of her lives, but damn it, she wanted to anger him by any means. She screamed in pain when he grabbed her hair from behind, pulling her closer to him and forcing her to look into his eyes. Christopher's features were stiff as he stared into her hateful eyes. "I will kill you painfully and slowly. You have no idea what I am capable of. So be careful. Do you understand? If a man touches you, I will kill you and make sure your death is not quick. Do you understand?" He pressed her hair even harder. Christopher felt like he would burn the whole world if someone else touched her. Celine's voice was provocative. "Why, dear Christopher, are you so busy with your work? So don't be harsh and let me have fun with someone else." Celine didn't feel anything until he slapped her with the back of his hand. The slap was so strong that she felt as if her skull had been separated from her body. The pain was terrible. Celine smiled angrily and looked at him again, only to receive another slap, stronger than the first. She laughed loudly and looked at him again, but this time she didn't give him a chance to hit her. Instead, she kissed him forcefully. She felt his body stiffen, but it was no use. No matter how much she tried to make him return her kiss, he didn't. It seemed his anger this time was stronger than her effect on him. Christopher clenched his teeth, trying to stay calm. Her lips were like heaven and drove him crazy. He had never lost control in his life as he did with her. She smiled while continuing to kiss him when she heard him curse under his breath. But she was surprised when he suddenly pulled her hair with great force, lifting her off her feet and pulling her down, making her sit beneath his foot. He added provocatively, "I won't sleep with you now, my whore. Your body is in a pitiful state. You can barely stand on your feet. You really look like a rotten corpse." He smiled slyly and continued, "And I don't sleep with corpses, my dear." The bastard had insulted her harshly and shattered her pride as well. It was as if he was not the one who had done this to her last night. She stood up, moving away from him, burning with rage. Christopher laughed loudly, leaving her and heading toward the drink table. But this time, he didn't approach the wine. Instead, he took out several bottles containing different herbal liquids, mixed them together into a uniform blend, then poured it into a glass. He turned to look at her. He continued staring at her for a long time. "Come here." But Celine remained standing in her place, not looking at him. Christopher's voice was calm, but threatening. "Darling, if you don't want me to come to you myself, and you know what I'll do if I come, then you can talk to me, and come." Celine looked at him angrily, but moved toward him despite herself. Her body was hurting like hell, and she couldn't endure another one of his fits of rage. Christopher moved the chair for her to sit. He sat in front of her and offered her the glass of herbal medicine. Celine's voice was disgusted. "What is this disgusting thing?" Christopher's voice was calm. "You will drink it." Celine looked at him in terror. "Impossible. I won't." Christopher's voice was firm. "You will. Now take the glass and drink it." Celine shook her head. "Stop, Christopher. Take this filth away from me." Christopher's voice hardened. "I won't repeat myself again. Take the damn glass and drink it." Celine was defiant. "I won't." Christopher's tone was deadly. "Fine, but don't complain later." He grabbed her jaw firmly, bringing the glass close to her mouth. Celine hit him, trying to escape, but to no avail. Christopher's voice was harsh. "Open your damn mouth." He began forcefully putting the herbs into her mouth. Celine screamed, but to no avail. She tasted the herbs in her mouth. Their taste was very good, unlike their appearance. Christopher didn't leave her until she drank everything in the glass. She quickly stood up, putting her hand over her mouth in disgust while wiping the herbs from her lips. Christopher's voice was flat. "Stop whining. You like the taste." Celine's voice was angry. "I hate you. I hope you burn in hell, Christopher." Christopher's voice was sarcastic. "And where do you think I came from?" Celine fell silent and didn't answer him. She was surprised when he grabbed her hair and pulled it strongly, throwing her onto the bed. She saw him take off his shirt. Her breath caught, as always, when she saw his body. His tattoos were frightening, and his muscles filled his form. His body was deadly, in every sense of the word. Celine really no longer knew what was happening to her. For heaven's sake. She swallowed nervously, talking to herself. "Damn, is this bastard going to sleep with me now?" But Christopher defied her expectations. He got under the covers, pulling her toward him, restraining her movements between his arms. Celine stared at him in surprise. His sharp voice came. "Sleep now. Celine blinked. What? Christopher's voice was sharp. Sleep, damn it. Celine quickly closed her eyes, afraid of him. Within minutes, she was asleep. When Christopher felt Celine's steady breathing, he closed his eyes in exhaustion and fell into a deep sleep, worn out by thoughts of the little one in his hands. At Victor's place, Victor had returned to the palace, but before going upstairs, he remembered the stab wound on his arm. He smiled slyly and removed the bandages, digging his nails forcefully into the wound and opening the stitches that closed it. He dug his nails into the wound again after opening the stitches, making his condition worse. Then he took a handkerchief from his pocket and calmly and enjoyably wiped the blood from his fingers, as if the blood he was wiping wasn't his own. He threw the handkerchief away and went upstairs to his beloved wife, Emily. He opened the door to find Emily barely finished putting on her clothes. Damn, how sexy and beautiful she was. Victor barely swallowed his saliva, clearing his throat quietly to attract her attention. Emily turned to him and found him standing before her, quietly staring at her. Emily was scared of him and took a few steps back, but she stopped when she noticed the heavy bleeding flowing from his arm. Her body trembled with fear, not for herself, but for Victor, who was still staring at her without uttering a word. Emily's voice was shaky. Blood. Victor looked coldly at his arm, then shifted his gaze back to her. He approached her quietly and stood in front of her, with only a small distance separating them. He whispered in her ear, "Go and bring the first aid kit, my cat." Emily nodded quickly and ran downstairs. As for Victor, he had intended to make her crawl like a cat, but when he saw the fear and worry in her eyes, he decided to let her go freely this time. Victor sat comfortably on the bed, a smile never leaving his face. Emily returned, carrying the first aid kit in her hand. He took her hand and sat her beside him, watching her as panic filled her features. Victor tried to hide his smile. "What's wrong with you? Come on, start bandaging my wound." Emily's voice was hesitant. But Victor's voice was calm. "I will die if you don't bandage it for me. I have lost a lot of blood. That way, you will be the one who killed me, my dear." She quickly grabbed the bandages with a trembling hand and began wiping the wound while Victor stared at her. After wiping the wound, she took the thread and needle. Her voice was soft. "This will hurt you." Victor nodded. Emily began stitching his wound while he closed his eyes in enjoyment. Damn, the touch of her soft hands was like heaven to him. Minutes passed, followed by seconds, until Emily finished stitching his wound. She wrapped it with a bandage. Emily's voice was quiet. "I'm done." Victor looked at Emily, then at the wound. He found it well bandaged. He grabbed Emily's arm and pulled her toward him, causing her to fall into his arms. Victor whispered, "What the hell are you wearing?" Emily's voice was fearful. "I'm sorry, I didn't." She couldn't finish her sentence because Victor interrupted her with his kiss. Yes, he kissed her eagerly and passionately, as if he had never kissed her before. His kiss lasted several minutes until Victor pulled away, feeling that Emily was about to lose consciousness in his arms. Emily gasped strongly, trying to get air into her lungs. She looked at him to find Victor's eyes full of desire and darkness. Victor's voice was low. "I need you, Emily." Emily blinked. "What?" Victor's voice was sly. "Do you think I'll waste the day just staring at your face?" Emily's voice was hesitant. "But, Victor, you're injured." Victor's voice was firm. "Even if I'm fighting death right now, I will make love to you." Emily started to speak. Victor didn't give her a chance. He made love to her and took her to another world, a world that belonged to them alone. At Joanna's place, Joanna woke up lazily, looking around to find herself in Ricardo's room. She looked beside her, but didn't find him. She adjusted her sitting position slightly, remembering what had happened before she fainted and how Ricardo had made her live through moments of real terror. Damn, she had been on the brink of death, and the most beautiful part was that Ricardo was just toying with her. Joanna smiled quietly. It seemed she would have to get used to Ricardo's madness, but really, she didn't mind dealing with Ricardo's rogue and devilish side. Yet she was absolutely certain that she could never handle his dark and terrifying side. So she had to act smartly with him. Joanna shifted restlessly in bed and pressed a button beside her on the wall. She waited a little until the door opened and one of the maids entered. The maid's voice was polite. "Please, miss." Joanna's voice was casual. "Is Ricardo here?" The maid shook her head. No, madam. He went to see Mr. Christopher, due to an urgent matter. Joanna nodded. Okay, dear, thank you. The maid quietly left. Joanna sighed boredly, then hugged Ricardo's pillow, burying her head in it and inhaling the scent of his perfume. She felt sleepy and fell asleep again. At Celine's place, Celine was sitting alone on the bed, lost in thought, thinking about her archenemy Christopher. She was thinking of a new way to drive him crazy and make him burn in the hell of love. But without realizing it, she found herself thinking about the end. Yes, the end. Would she kill him with her own hands? But if she couldn't kill him, and he stayed alive and she moved away from him, would he continue his life like that? And would he find another girl instead of her? For a few seconds, Celine felt intense anger. Damn it, she couldn't imagine Christopher with any girl other than her. Celine snapped back to herself. She didn't deny that she was surprised by her own anger. Could it be that she was jealous of him? As soon as she asked herself this question, her mind took her, without realizing it, to Christopher, to his kisses, to the moments with him, to his love for her, to the moment he confessed, to her strong attraction to him, and her interaction with him, in addition to the feelings that stormed inside her every time she saw him, and shook her very being. Damn, damn, damn. This meant she truly loved him, by the creator of hell. Yes, Celine was certain that she had fallen in love with Christopher, just as he had fallen in love with her before. Yes, she loved him, and that made tears race down her cheeks non-stop. How could she love the very person she wanted to take revenge on? How? For moments, just a few moments, Celine thought about abandoning the idea of revenge and living quietly with Christopher. But damn it, she couldn't. Yes, she couldn't let her parents' blood go to waste. Maybe if Max wasn't Christopher's father, it would have been simple. She could have forgotten her revenge and lived with him. But this matter was different. She must not weaken in front of her feelings and her love for Christopher. Since she had started on the path of revenge, she would complete it to the end. Yes, that's what she would do. Celine's voice was sad. You know, Christopher, because I love you, I swear to you that I am the one who will kill you. No one else will do it. She smiled mockingly at herself. I can't believe that revenge, fear, love, passion, hatred, and resentment all gathered in one heart. Christopher. Everything is beautiful in its time. Then she went to the world of dreams, where it was just her and her beloved Christopher, alone. On a new morning, Ricardo had left his palace to take care of his business. He got into his car and headed toward Victor. After some time, Ricardo got out of his car and entered the adjacent building with calm steps. He kept walking until he reached the so-called pleasure room. Ricardo opened the door and entered. Before him lay a horribly disfigured corpse. Victor stood coldly with his clothes covered in blood, holding a dissolving substance in his hand, and calmly pouring it over the corpse, watching it dissolve from the effect. It was a sight no human could bear to see. So how could he do it with such cold nerves? Victor realized Ricardo's presence and said sarcastically, "What are you doing here, my dear?" Ricardo matched his sarcasm. "Pull out, my dear." "How about pulling out your tongue?" Ricardo shook his head. "No, my dear. My tongue is more useful than your empty mind." Victor fell silent. He didn't want to enter into an argument with Ricardo, whose outcome was clear. After a moment of silence, Ricardo added, "Why didn't you wait for me? You took all the pleasure alone, you mean one?" Victor smiled. "I couldn't resist the smell of blood. I started playing with him alone. Next time I'll wait for you, or leave him to you." Ricardo nodded calmly. "The Russian Mafia is digging against us." Victor furrowed his brows. "Yes, continue." Ricardo sighed anxiously. "I fear they will target the girls, Joanna, Emily, and Celine." Victor's voice was sharp. "And how would they know about them?" Ricardo smiled. "They know, my friend. Just as we know a lot, they also have their methods and know much. Aren't we a threat to their deals?" Victor nodded convincingly. "I will make sure Emily does not leave the palace, not even to the garden. I will tighten security around the palace." Ricardo agreed. "Yes, and I will do the same." Victor's voice was firm. "Tell Christopher as well, so he can take his precautions too." Ricardo nodded. "I will." Victor stood. "Okay, let's go." Victor and Ricardo left to continue their work. They had a weapons deal tonight. Away from Victor and Ricardo, in that huge palace, Celine was sitting on the bed feeling suffocated. Damn, ever since Celine realized her feelings for Christopher, she began to feel as if the world had become narrow for her. Everything around her increased her suffocation. She wanted to cry. Actually, she was on the verge of crying, but she was holding herself together. He found Celine in front of him, staring at him with withered eyes. A few moments later, Celine broke down and entered a hysterical crying fit that confused Christopher. He hadn't done anything to her today, and had never seen her cry like that before. When Celine saw Christopher, she didn't have a single ounce of composure left. She burst into tears. She cried intensely, oblivious to her surroundings, until she felt Christopher lift her off the bed, making her sit on his lap in his arms. His hands found her slender waist, holding her tightly. Celine didn't realize what was happening until she was hugging him tightly, wrapping her arms around his neck, embracing him as if her life depended on it. Celine felt his body trembling with anger in her hands. She really didn't know what made him so angry now. She could hear the sound of his racing heartbeat. She felt as if time had stopped for a moment as she buried her face in his neck, muffling the sound of her continuous crying. She needed him. That embrace that spread warmth through every fiber of her being. It was all she wanted at that moment. She wished to stay like that forever, without thinking about revenge. His masculine scent, his air, and his stone-like body were her grave. Yes, it was the first time she embraced him like this, without pain, without hatred, and without resentment, only with love and need. She didn't know how long she stayed in that state, hearing nothing but the sound of his breaths, feeling nothing but his touches. But she returned to reality when Christopher pulled her slightly away from him, looking at her face calmly. Celine lowered her eyes, afraid of what she might see in his eyes. Her breaths barely escaped her. Christopher lifted her chin to look at him. Her heart stopped completely in its place. His eyes were a sea of pain, and his eyelids were red from suffering. Celine was confused by his condition and by the amount of pain in his eyes. If only she knew that she was the cause of his pain and his suffering. But how could she know? Christopher looked at her as if he didn't know what to do with her, as if his mind and heart were fighting because of her. At that moment, Celine realized that her pain, hatred, and suffering were because of her absolute love for him. She had loved him from the moment she saw him without knowing it, and had not stopped adoring him for a single second. But how? When Celine opened her mouth to speak, Christopher silenced her by tearing her lips apart with a savage kiss. She gasped, feeling her breath violently taken away. She wanted to push him away, wanted to object, but he threw her onto the bed, devouring her lips mercilessly as if punishing her for everything. Yes, for everything. His feelings, his love for her, his hatred toward her, his weakness with her, her tears, her sadness, and everything. Christopher pulled away after feeling that she was about to lose consciousness in his arms. He moved away slightly, placing his forehead on hers, closing his eyes with pleasure. He opened his eyes, staring at Celine. "Don't you dare cry in front of me again. You are not allowed to cry unless I am the reason. Only I have the right to make you cry, and no one else. Do you understand?" Celine closed her eyes with sorrow. He didn't know that he was indeed the reason for her crying. She nodded quietly, finding him smiling as he gently touched her body. He moved closer and kissed beside her blood-red lips, whispering near her ear, "You're still weak and exhausted. It seems the herbs took effect, but you need more rest. I won't make love to you now." Christopher pulled away and got up from the bed, looking into her eyes with cunning and triumph. Celine smiled. "Damn you. I promise I will kill you with my own hands." Christopher's voice was calm. "Let's see what you can do, my delicious whore." Celine's voice was angry. "You bastard. Damn you. May you burn in hell." Christopher laughed mockingly, then turned and left the room coldly, leaving her burning with anger behind him. He left with a victorious smile on his face, because he had managed to rid her of her sadness through her anger. He knew she would get angry and forget all her sadness. Then he left the palace to take care of some business. As for Celine, she buried her face in the pillow, screaming in rage at that damn Christopher, who made her want to kill him because of his provocative behavior. Then she calmed down and decided to sleep a little, to rest from that storm of emotions that showed no mercy and struck her hard. She dozed off, going to the world of dreams, that rosy world far removed from reality. The next morning, Victor woke up quietly. He looked to his side and did not find Emily beside him. He stared at her empty place, then sighed with sorrow, and got up to take a hot shower. As soon as he finished, he came out drying his hair, put on his shirt, and left the room. He stood at the top of the stairs, watching Emily barely move with her steps, from extreme exhaustion. She had woken even before dawn to start cleaning, because the palace was very, very large. She had to clean it in addition to cooking. Victor could not bear to see her so weak and exhausted, walking helplessly, trying hard to do what he had assigned her. He turned back to the room with angry steps. Yes, angry. He was angry at himself for what he was doing to his beloved. He entered and slammed the door behind him forcefully. He sat on the bed, breathing heavily and rapidly. Many minutes passed, and he remained in that state. He lightly wiped his face and decided to end her punishment today, because he could no longer bear the pain of his little one. Yes, he was punishing her, but he was the one suffering many times over because of her. She was sad, and he felt his soul leaving his body because of her tears and sorrow. He was torturing himself. Victor smiled sarcastically at himself. Every time, he never completed Emily's punishment. There was no time he decided to punish her and actually completed the punishment as planned. Even when he decided to lock her in the basement until the next morning, he couldn't complete 2 hours. He went to her and quickly took her out. And when he decided to whip her 100 lashes so she wouldn't try to escape again, he couldn't complete the punishment and stopped halfway. Even when he slapped her, he didn't put all his strength into the blow. Despite his anger, he was thinking of her. And now, when he decided to keep her as a servant under his feet and an obedient animal for 2 months, not even a few days passed before he found himself deciding to end her punishment because he couldn't bear her pain. Victor got up after deciding to end her punishment, but not before making her feel deep regret for escaping, and instilling in her the idea that he could turn her life into unbearable hell if she thought of running away again. He left the room and headed downstairs. He found that Emily had finished preparing the food. He went and sat at the table. Emily placed the food in front of him and stepped back a few steps, waiting for him to eat. But Victor did not touch the food. Instead, he stared at her calmly. His gaze confused Emily. She stood in place, rubbing her hands nervously, trying to steal glances while keeping her eyes fixed on the ground. Victor took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. He said calmly, "Get down on the floor, on your knees, my cat." Emily's body trembled with fear as she obeyed. She sat on the floor, on her knees, biting her lower lip nervously. Emily's voice was soft. "Please, She didn't finish because Victor interrupted. "I didn't give you permission to speak, my kitten." Emily lowered her head in fear and didn't utter a word. Victor's voice was firm. "Your hands behind your back, and your delicious lips. If you don't stop biting them, I will bite them myself. You can imagine how much I will enjoy that." As soon as Emily heard his words, she pressed her lips together, closing her mouth. Victor smiled at his little one, but quickly composed himself. His features returned to their stoic expression. He began eating his meal quietly, glancing every now and then at his little one, who sat on the floor with her small body trembling in fear. Victor finished eating half the food. Satisfied with that, he relaxed his body on the chair, staring at Emily. "Come on, my cat. Come forward to eat your food." Emily swallowed nervously, nodded, and stood up. Before she could take the first step, his cold voice stopped her. "What are you doing?" Emily stared at him with confusion and fear. She really did not want to make any mistake, so she wouldn't be punished. She didn't have the strength to endure any punishment now. Emily's voice was hesitant. "I am carrying out your orders." Victor's voice was flat. "And did I allow you to stand?" Emily's body trembled with fear. Her voice was low and frightened. What should I do?" Victor looked at her sharply, then looked down at her feet on the ground. Emily gasped, trying not to cry. She nodded helplessly. She knelt again on the ground, but this time on her knees and hands. Victor's voice was calm. "And now, my cat, come to me." Emily swallowed the lump of sadness inside her and went to him. Victor made her sit at his feet like a cat, took a spoon, filled it with food, and brought it close to her mouth to feed her. But Emily couldn't control herself. She broke down crying, which was what Victor wanted before ending her punishment. He fed her against her will, while her tears kept falling. When the plates were empty, Victor looked toward Emily, who sat broken beneath his foot. He bent toward her, placed his hand under her chin, and lifted her face, forcing her to look at him. Emily cried heavily. "Please, Victor, enough. Please, I swear I can't bear it anymore. I beg you. Enough. Have mercy on me, please." Victor's voice was calm. "Will you run away from me again, my princess?" Emily shook her head in refusal. Victor smiled and continued. "You won't leave me, Emily. Your place is here by my side, isn't it?" Emily nodded quietly. Victor added, "All right, my princess. Your punishment is over." Emily stared at him in confusion, and stammered, "What?" Victor's voice was gentle. "Everything will go back to how it was before. The servants will return to the palace, and our relationship will return to how it was before our marriage. Is that clear, my princess?" Emily nodded quickly, unable to believe she would return to her previous life. Yes, that life she had never accepted before. She now longed to return to it. Victor stood up. In a calm, gentle tone, he addressed Emily, who was on all fours beneath his foot like a cat. "Get up." Emily stood up slowly, but as soon as she straightened, she suddenly felt dizzy. She could see nothing but darkness before her eyes. She tried to open her eyelids, placing her hand on her head and pressing slightly to ease the pain. She failed. She fell into Victor's arms. He caught her, holding her as she felt nothing. Victor hugged her to his chest, his hands around her waist. He stroked her hair and kissed her head. He carried her in his arms while she was unconscious. She only felt that the world had disappeared around her, seeing nothing but darkness. This was due to the physical and psychological exhaustion Victor had inflicted on her. Victor carried her upstairs and entered his room. He headed directly to the bathroom. He placed her in the tub and turned on the water, letting it pour over her. She moaned in pain. After a while, she opened her eyes, as if awakened from that state. She saw Victor standing over her, calmly staring. Victor took Emily out of the tub. He removed her clothes and threw them aside. She remained naked in front of him, burning with embarrassment and looking down. Victor smiled quietly at her. He brought out other clothes, different from the wet ones, and dressed her like a little child. He carried her and placed her on the bed. He climbed beside her, holding her to his chest. He whispered softly in her ear, "Sleep now. You desperately need rest." Emily nodded in agreement and quickly closed her eyes. Within minutes, she entered the world of dreams. As for Victor, he remained awake, inhaling her scent every now and then while she was in his arms. He thought about protecting her. He could not expose her to danger, no matter the cost. In another place, Joanna was sitting in her room, feeling extremely bored. It seemed that Ricardo had passed on his mischief and madness to her. Joanna stared at the ceiling for many minutes. Well, if she stayed like this any longer, she would go crazy from the intense boredom. In those few minutes, Joanna felt that her relationship with the walls had deepened. She even began to think about the differences between them. The front wall was silver-colored. To her right, a darker color. To her left, the room's door was in the middle. The stage of naming the walls was next. She sighed quietly and got up from her bed. She had reached her limit. She had to get out of the palace now, or she would inevitably suffocate. Joanna left the room and went downstairs. She found Ricardo about to leave. She didn't care about that. She moved forward, intending to go out. Ricardo's voice stopped her. Ricardo's voice was sharp. "Where are you going, little one?" Joanna shrugged. "I'm tired of sitting. I'm going out for a bit." Ricardo's voice was firm. "You can't do that." Joanna furrowed her brows in annoyance. "What?" Ricardo's voice was flat. "As you heard, there is no leaving the palace." Joanna barely kept her nerves. "Why?" Ricardo was silent for a moment, thinking of a suitable answer. If he told her, she wouldn't listen. This girl's madness and recklessness had no limits. He also didn't want to show interest in her matter, but on the other hand, letting her go would put her life in danger, which he could never allow. Ricardo's voice was cold. "Because I want it." Joanna's voice rose. "Damn you! I will go out whether you like it or not." Ricardo's voice was dangerous. "Take one step outside the palace, and be sure that I will break your legs, my dear." Damn it! She knew that Ricardo was serious, and wouldn't hesitate for a moment to break her legs. She turned to him angrily. "Fine, then I won't leave the palace, but don't expect me to let you leave either. As long as I'm in the palace, you will stay in the palace, and won't go out." Ricardo smiled mockingly at her. Joanna didn't give herself a chance to think. She approached him and kissed him softly. Ricardo stiffened from her kiss. She smiled and moved away from him. But Ricardo was ready for her. He grabbed her hair forcefully and attacked her lips, kissing her violently and strongly, as if punishing her for provoking him. Ricardo kept kissing Joanna. She lost her breath in his hands. She tried to push him away, but it was useless. She tried to hit him, but it was no use. He was as solid as a rock. Joanna remained like that for several more minutes, until she lost consciousness in Ricardo's hands. Only then did Ricardo pull away from her, staring at her with a smile. This was what he wanted, to make her lose consciousness so she wouldn't resist or try to leave the palace. He carried her in his arms and went back to her room. He placed her on the bed and kissed her cheek. Then he left the room and then the entire palace, feeling reassured about his little one. The next day, Celine opened her eyes, annoyed by the sunlight. She looked beside her and found that Christopher was not there, or rather, he had not returned since he left the room when she cried in his arms. Yes, he had not returned for 2 days. So as always, whenever Christopher was not around, Celine's morning was a boring morning. She looked at the clock beside her. It was past 2 in the afternoon. She sighed wearily, sitting up and lifting her hair. She felt as if her life had become as boring as hell since that cursed man left. Nothing interested her anymore. She only waited eagerly for his return. She headed to the living room and sat there, sipping the cup of coffee. Seconds passed, then minutes, until the maid's voice interrupted her. The maid's voice was polite. "Mr. Christopher wants you on the phone." Celine's breath stopped for a second. She felt a very beautiful pain in her heart and a strong, pleasurable tremor in her stomach. She swallowed nervously, trying to keep control of herself. It was very strange how just his name could restore energy and life to her body. How could just mentioning his name have this effect on her? Was this hatred? Celine put down the coffee cup with forced calm, trying to keep her expression stiff. Okay. The maid nodded and left, leaving Celine staring at the phone with a blankness that did not reveal the true volcano inside her. Why the hell was she eager to hear his voice? She clenched her teeth angrily, telling herself, "Come back to your senses. Since when have you been foolish?" She stood with a cold expression, walking toward the phone indifferently. She lifted the receiver to her ear. She wanted to say something, mockery or sarcasm, but as soon as she heard his breath, she closed her eyes, her own breath catching as if her voice was buried in her throat. What on earth was happening to her? Her hand trembled, but she remained calm, listening to his breaths with coldness. Several moments passed. Christopher's breaths worked wonders on her body, until his voice came to her. Christopher's voice was smooth. "Have you been behaving well in my absence?" Celine smiled quietly. "Did you miss me?" Christopher laughed lightly. "Never." "And you?" Celine's voice was flat. "It never crossed my mind." Christopher's tone turned sly. "Really, you whore?" Celine got angry at him for calling her a whore. She struck back. "Yes, dear, to the point that I started thinking about sleeping with some men and having some fun until you return." Christopher's voice sharpened. "Just because I am not beside you now, does not mean I am incapable of tearing your heart out of its place." Celine laughed out loud. "Calm down. I'm just joking." Christopher murmured quietly to her. Silence dominated the call. Neither spoke a word. He just smoked his cigar indifferently, and she also did not utter a word. They stayed like that, listening to each other's breaths, each lost in their thoughts for a long time. Finally, Christopher spoke. "What?" Celine's voice was soft. "I feel bored." "No, I'm dying of boredom in your absence." Christopher's tone was indifferent. "Really?" Celine's voice grew more intimate. "Yes, I miss you. I miss the way you look at me. I miss your scent, your voice, your guilty touches on my body, and most of all, I miss your harsh lips tearing mine. It has only been 2 days since you left, but I already miss you." Christopher closed his eyes, leaning his head back. The woman was killing him with every word. Celine's voice was calm. "I miss my tormentor, Christopher." Christopher opened his eyes. His voice was cold. "I'm coming." He hung up without giving her a chance to respond. Celine sat quietly on the bed, with a smile on her face. This was what she wanted, to see Christopher, perhaps out of longing for him, and perhaps to practice her ways on him, to make him angry and lose his mind, because of her love. Who knows? Seconds passed, followed by minutes. Silence ruled the place until Christopher arrived, with his imposing presence and strength. He entered the room. He immediately headed to the bathroom, took a shower, and came out bare-chested, drying his hair with a towel. His appearance was breathtaking. He found Celine standing in front of him, staring at him, unable to look away. Christopher smiled slyly. "How about taking a picture for memory?" "There's no need for that. Your appearance is like a claw." She couldn't finish her sentence. Christopher slapped her hard with the back of his hand over her mouth, causing her to fall to the ground, with her mouth bleeding. Celine smiled quietly, wiping the blood from her lips. She stood up and looked calmly into his eyes. Christopher's voice was cold. "What, you whore? Do you want me to sleep with you?" Celine's voice was steady. "You're the one burning, aren't you, my dear?" Christopher shook his head threateningly. He added quietly, "All right, let's see." He approached Celine quietly, pushing her forcefully against the wall. She felt as if her back was breaking. Christopher pressed against her and whispered beside her ear, "You have one last chance to back down before I break your bones, my dear." Celine breathed heavily and did not answer. She felt his hands grabbing her dress, about to tear it. She grabbed his hands. "Stop." Christopher smiled triumphantly. "Why?" Celine blinked. "Huh?" Christopher's voice was low. "Why should I stop? Tell me one reason, and I will stop." Words escaped Celine's mind for a few seconds, but she quickly recovered. "Damn you, Christopher. I won't have any clothes left if you tear this one too. Really, I won't have anything to wear, because you have already torn all the clothes I wear." Christopher stared at her quietly, as if she had just reminded him of something. He kept staring at her for a long few minutes. Then he stepped away and continued putting on his shirt. "Get ready, we're going." Celine was surprised. "Where to?" Christopher's voice was sharp. "No questions. Come on." She took out her shoes and put them on, then went out with Christopher, heading together to a place she still did not know. Ricardo and Victor had just finished the arms deal, and left the place to return to their car. Victor's voice was angry. "How much I want to smash Christopher's face. How can he just leave the business on our heads?" Ricardo laughed cheerfully. "Yes, that bastard is probably enjoying his time now." Victor grumbled in annoyance. Ricardo stared at him for a moment, then added, "All right, I'll call him now to see where he is." Victor nodded. "Okay." Ricardo took his phone and called Christopher. Christopher's voice was flat. "What do you want?" Ricardo's voice was demanding. "Where are you, you bastard?" Christopher sighed boredly. "What's that got to do with you?" Ricardo pressed. "Just answer me, damn it." Christopher's voice was cold. "I'm in the car now, heading to the Central Market." Ricardo's voice rose. "What, the Central Market? Are you delirious?" Christopher's voice was sharp. "No, I'm not delirious. Now get off my face." He hung up. Ricardo looked at Victor in disbelief. Ricardo's voice was shocked. "Did you hear what I just heard?" Victor nodded. "Yes, I heard. And it seems Christopher is starting to lose his mind." Ricardo nodded quietly. A cunning, devilish smile appeared on his face. Victor noticed. Victor's voice was wary. "Don't tell me you—" Ricardo's smile widened. "Yes, we're going to see Christopher at the commercial market." Victor shook his head. "Impossible. Forget it." Ricardo was firm. "No, we will. I assure you we will have a lot of fun." Victor sighed helplessly. "All right, let's go." Ricardo smiled cheerfully, started the car, and immediately headed toward the commercial market. It was close to their location now, at Christopher and Celine's place. Celine's voice was uncertain. "Are we really going to the commercial market?" Christopher's voice was flat. "Yes." Celine pressed. "Why?" Christopher's voice was cold. "Because I want to." Celine fell silent, unable to speak. They had already arrived at the center. Christopher got out of the car. Celine did the same. Christopher added coldly, "Come on, go pick out some clothes so we can go back." Celine's voice was defiant. "I don't want to." Christopher's voice sharpened. "I swear, Celine, if you don't go in now, I will do things to you that even prostitutes would be ashamed of doing. They would tremble in fear just hearing about it. So go quietly before I lose my patience." Celine grumbled annoyedly and reluctantly entered the commercial center, cursing Christopher inside. She wandered through the store and chose several pieces of clothing, along with several women's bags. Then, she headed to the payment area. Celine wanted to pay, but the owner told her that Mr. Christopher had already paid. She left burning with anger, and swore to make him regret the moment he thought of bringing her here. And truly, Celine's luck was very good. She got the chance to do that on a silver platter. When she came out, she found Christopher standing with two men. One was the same man who had taken out Christopher's father's body. The other, she had never seen before. Celine calmly approached to greet them. She placed her belongings in the car, then stood with them. Celine's voice was polite. "Hello, I'm Celine. And you are?" Ricardo smiled. "Ricardo, a friend of Christopher. And this is Victor, also a friend of Christopher." Celine's voice was light. "Oh, that's great. I didn't expect Christopher to have friends." For a moment, Celine remembered her anger at Christopher. She smiled slyly and added, directing her words to Ricardo, "You know, you seem like a very wonderful person." She moved closer and hugged him, all under Christopher's watchful eyes. He had been staring at Celine the whole time, while she avoided looking at him and remained in Ricardo's arms. Damn, how much he wanted to slap her at that moment. His hand ached to break all her bones, but not now. Patience was a virtue. Celine ended her hug with Ricardo and pulled away. She met Christopher's terrifying eyes. At that moment, she truly wished she hadn't done it. She could almost swear he was thinking about breaking her bones right then. His eyes were full of promises. She wanted to do the same with Victor, but Christopher's gaze terrified her, so she didn't dare. But damn it, can Celine really back down so easily from playing? So she continued, extending her hand and wrapping it around Ricardo's arm. Celine's voice was admiring. "What a beautiful watch. I really like it. You have very good taste, Ricardo." Christopher looked at her hand around Ricardo's arm. He put his hand over his mouth, sparks flying from his eyes. The man standing there was his friend, even considered like a brother. He never doubted him, but the woman was deliberately trying to anger him. Celine was sure he would lose control soon. She knew him well. When he got very angry, he put his hand over his mouth. She swallowed nervously and quietly removed her hand from Ricardo's arm. As for Ricardo, he took off the watch from his wrist and gave it to Celine. She put it on. Celine's voice was grateful. "Oh, thank you." Ricardo shrugged. "It's nothing." Christopher put his hands in his pockets to prevent himself from strangling the woman in front of him. He felt his blood boiling. Celine sensed the danger. Christopher was on the verge of exploding. Damn, he would definitely kill her tonight. Without realizing it, she found herself trembling with fear, barely able to stand. She looked up at him. He stared at her with intense hatred. She could almost swear she saw death in his eyes, a sea of anger that almost swallowed her suddenly. And without any warning, that hatred in his eyes turned into intense fear. His eyes widened in terror as he moved toward her. Celine closed her eyes, thinking he had lost control and would punish her right there. She didn't realize it until he pulled her, turning her to face him. She gasped, ready for the pain of his slap, but nothing happened. She felt his strong hands holding her, but he did not hit her. She opened her eyes to the angry voices of Ricardo and Victor. She looked up at Christopher in surprise to see fear. Yes, she saw the fear in Christopher's eyes. He looked at her with intense fear, as if he would die if he looked away. Suddenly, time stopped for her. What was happening? Why was her heart beating so hard? Christopher clenched his teeth in pain as she stared at him in confusion. She was lost in another world, not even noticing the sound of gunfire around her. Ricardo and Victor continued shooting. Celine came back to her senses when Christopher turned, giving her his back. He pulled out his gun and fired alongside Ricardo and Victor. At that moment, Celine saw something that froze her breath and ripped her heart from its place. It was the bullet lodged in his back. She gasped as if someone had pulled her soul from her body. She didn't even feel her tears, which began to fall hysterically. Only a few seconds passed, and it was over. Christopher, Victor, and Ricardo had killed all the men. Christopher turned to look at Celine, but damn, his body burned with pain. His vision blurred, his breathing slowed. He fell to the ground, unable to endure any longer. Victor shouted at Ricardo at the top of his voice. "Damn it, Ricardo, the bullet is poisoned. Bring the car here quickly," he continued, addressing Christopher. "Hold on a little, my friend." Christopher struggled to breathe. He turned his head toward Celine, who looked at him with terrified eyes. Damn, his heart had almost stopped from fear a little while ago. What if something happened to her? The mere thought drove him crazy. He swallowed nervously, continuing to look into her eyes. He smiled as he looked at her, fighting to stay awake. If he died, Her image would be the last thing he saw. That made him smile. He would not leave her, even if he died. He would tear down hell and come back to her, to be his again, his alone. This was the last thing Christopher thought before he closed his eyes. The Devil's Captive ends here. I hope you enjoyed the story. You want the Devil's Fall next? If yes, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when the new story is published. See you soon.